I think now there's a faction of you that have grown up in Chicago who probably are like, okay, yeah, it's been here forever. So I'm from the East Coast similarly, and when you get here and you're driving, you're looking for a radio station, and you're crossing the Skyway, and you're driving under whatever mayoral placard that they've done. I actually had the same thing, and XRT was on when I drove in a rainstorm in 1997? I don't know, whenever. It was a long time ago. And I haven't looked back, and thank you, because love comes in many forms, and definitely one of them is radio. Also martyrs and like live music and all this. I remember working a really shitty job with really great people who were in all kinds of art forms, because in Chicago you can kind of do that. And we were like, no more bands playing at Martyrs. I was like, I don't know what that is, I'll go. And so, oh God, also 97, so great. Our next storyteller is a friend of mine, and I'm so glad she's here, and she's told a lot of stories here at Louder Than a Mom, and I'm so excited she's back. She is a comedian, a baker, and a runner. She does work downtown just to, get money. And she's dedicated to her husband, who I also think is really great, cheeseburgers, and TV, in no particular order. Let's welcome to the stage again, Lindsay Williams.
I do love cheeseburgers. Thank you so much for that story. I wish I would have written my story about how much I love Chicago, because it's my whole world, and anybody who doesn't like it can just, eat a bag of dicks. So there you go. When I think about the first time I was in love, I was about 5 years old. And Michael J. Fox was playing Alex P. Keaton on Family Ties. And at this age, I was obviously able to put aside his love of Reagan and the Republican Party. Then Back to the Future came out, and my crush was solidified. My roster quickly grew as I added Sean Astin from The Goonies, and obviously Josh Brolin. Then Bruce Willis, specifically in Moonlighting, and eventually Pulp Fiction and Die Hard with a Vengeance. Ray Liotta in Goodfellas, followed by Matthew Perry as Chandler, specifically in season 2 of Friends. Robert De Niro in Heat, Ben Affleck in Chasing Amy, Tom Everett Scott in That Thing You Do, Ethan Hawke in Before Sunrise, and Ewan McGregor in Everything. I could go on, so I will. Paul Rudd in Clueless, Robert Sean Leonard in Much Ado About Nothing, Keanu Reeves in Much Ado About Nothing, Denzel Washington in Much Ado About Nothing. My childhood and teenage years were full of crushes, celebrity and real. There was Hunter, who lived across the street from my grandparents and was also my middle school classmate. George, Tim, Nikki, etc., also in my middle school class. There were only 24 of us at our small Catholic school, so in our grade, so I didn't have many guys to choose from. High school was a little different, as my dad was the athletic director at the school, and I had known most of the faculty since I was a baby. So I was mostly thought of as Coach Williams' kid, and not the cute new girl. And the real challenge was dances. Sadie Hawkins, Winter Formal, prom, and I had to find dates because nobody ever asked me. And I wasn't sure if it was because I was a dork or because my dad worked there. And I even made up a boyfriend at one point my junior year. He was a real person from summer camp, but I made up the boyfriend part. And I don't know if that's any less depressing or sad, but I continued to waste time on high school crushes, mostly my classmate William. We shared a lot of similarities, like the same birthday, a love of yearbook committee, the school newspaper, and the constant of me chasing him and him pretending it didn't annoy the shit out of him. But alas, it was not meant to be. He was valedictorian, a Harvard legacy, and destined to run his dad's business, and develop what I heard was a kind of bad coke problem. So as high school transitioned to college, I realized I had to have a relationship with a real boy. And then I met Barrett. It was the summer of 2000. I was about to be a junior at TCU, and it was early August, and my roommate Abby and I decided to go for a swim in our apartment complex pool. Pretty soon we were joined by two guys who lived in a nearby building. We started chatting, which led to flirting, which led to scheduling a double date for that night. Chuck and Barrett asked us to dinner and a movie. Well, first we went to opposite sides of the pool, of course. Abby and I discussing which guy we favored, and Chuck and Barrett on the other side, presumably planning on how to ask us out. Back at our apartment, Abby promptly claimed Chuck for herself because she said Barrett was kind of a nerd, which was perfect for me because I like Barrett and I like nerds. And as we drove to dinner, the conversation was figuring out each other's likes. I sat up front with Barrett, and we talked about film, books, music. And I asked him, "Who's your favorite band?" And his answer was exactly what I wanted to hear. "U2," he said. "What?" I squealed. "That's my favorite band." And apparently, that's all it took. I knew that we were fated to be together. I mean, how common is it that someone else's favorite band is one of the most popular rock bands of the last 50 years? And I'm married. So the night was pretty much a success. The conversation was great, dinner was great. The movie, Me, Myself, and Irene, was not great. But we recovered quickly, and we all went back to Chuck and Barrett's apartment to hang out and watch TV. Jackass, to be specific. It was 2000, so Jackass was brand new and very popular. So eventually, Abby and Chuck disappeared back to his room. Abby was a bit more experienced than me, and she had been living it up since her breakup. And unbeknownst to me, she left and walked back over to our apartment. Something happened between her and Chuck that I will never know, but he did seem scared of her after that, which didn't surprise me. She could be sort of aggressive sexually. I was a lot more shy and clueless, so I was not likely to make the first move. The extent of my sex education came from the 1993 thriller Sliver, starring Sharon Stone and William Baldwin. That's about it. Thanks, Catholic upbringing. Anyways, Barrett used the classic move of, "Can I show you something in my room?" And long story short, I spent the night. No, we didn't go all the way. I was actually still a virgin at the time. Shout out to Victoria. I also lost my virginity at 23. Yay! The next 6 weeks were a whirlwind romance. We went to the movies, swam in the apartment pool where we first met, went to dinner, went on late night drives, and sometimes I went to see his band. That's right, everybody, Barrett was in a band. He sang and played guitar with a group called, wait for it, Bottleneck. I thought they were amazing, and I'm sure if I heard them today, they would sound like shit. But I was in love, or so I thought. I even met his family, his mom and all 5 of his siblings. We mostly hung out at his place because Abby couldn't seem to let go of him being a nerd, or maybe she hated that I was dating someone. I have no idea. Suffice to say, Abby was a really shitty friend. Anyways, I was having the summer of my life, but unfortunately, things had to come to an end. Well, because Barrett ended them, but he did it after I had spent the night, and in that sneaky way, so I didn't realize it until after I left. I actually drove back by his place later that day and called him crying from my cell phone, making him promise we would go see some concert we had talked about, and he did. And spoiler alert, we never went. I would purposely drive a long way through the apartment complex so I could go past his place. I would swim in the pool, maybe hoping he'd see me. I even told him once that I needed to give him back a book I had borrowed and suggested meeting up, but he said to just put it in his school mailbox. Yes, keep in mind, we were going to the same school. My most desperate attempt was while I was sitting in the computer lab on campus, and I glanced out the window to the front of the student center. Barrett had been dropped off by a friend and began walking towards the entrance of the building. I quickly signed off the computer, crammed my belongings in my backpack, and darted out of the lab and around the corner, running down the hallway, pretending to casually run into him while literally out of breath. I was so devastated, but I did start to realize how stupid I was being and how this love affair had only been a summer fling for him. So I decided to take matters in my own hands and stop feeling sorry for myself. So I started asking out everyone. Even a super popular guy on campus my friends and I had lusted after for years. And I also lost my virginity. Unfortunately, it was with my best friend, so we didn't talk much after that. Oops. So that fun lasted a little while, but I found myself still alone, a college graduate with no direction and feeling irrelevant. I moved here to Chicago a couple years later to do comedy, and as we all know, the comedy community is full of nothing but mature men. There was a guy I dated for a couple months who was still hanging out with his ex, and when I told him I liked him, he broke things off 2 days later. The improviser who introduced me to his girlfriend a week after we made out. The guys I hung out with because honestly, they wore me down. The late night text saying, "Where the party at?" Or my personal favorite, "You up?" And then there were some of my girlfriends who were just pushing me to meet somebody, anybody. And it's funny because Barrett and I actually reconnected about 7 years later when I came back home to visit family, and we went on a really fun date. And I helped him realize that he was in love with his good friend, Maureen, and now they're married with 3 kids. So glad I could be part of that. It's like my college friend Cody, who I made out with and helped him realize that he was gay. Always happy to help. So after almost a decade, I stopped looking. And I tried to let things happen on their own. It's so cliche. But I was 36 when I had my first boyfriend, and then 43 when we got married. And like a cheesy rom-com, I had commented on his haircut in an Instagram pic, and 2 weeks later we ran into each other walking down Belmont, each of us going the opposite way to do an improv show at theaters 1 block from each other. And now here we are 10 years later, and it turns out all a guy really needs to do is ask you out with a time, a date, and a place in mind. Seriously, guys, you won't believe how little that actually happens. So I did happen to find romantic love, but on the way I found self-love, unrequited love, relationships I thought were love, but weren't, and the love of friends. And I found out that all of those are equally important. Thank you.